So, sales process. Now, how and what is the best way to get people through the sales process? So, when a property has been sale agreed, what basically happens is we send a memo of sale. We've done the job and we've agreed a price. So we put the price on the memo of sale. So that could be a price of 500,000. Any conditions? So conditional on any particular timescale. So you need to be careful with that and have filled out the chain incredibly detailed, which you always must do when you're sending a sale through to solicitors. And basically what you're doing is you've got your memo of sale, which is describing the price, the people, all the legal owners of the property, all the legal buyers of the property, any conditions of the sale, any fixtures in the sale, and any particular timescale attached to that sale. Before you actually state fixtures and if you're going to state particular timescales, that all needs to be properly agreed by all parties. You need to, if you have a chain, go down the chain, actually check that the chain can manage that timescale, because there have been cases and case studies where we want a 5-week exchange, but the person at the bottom of the chain certainly can't achieve anything better than a 3-month exchange. So if there's any timescales involved, making sure that you've checked out all of the actual areas of the chain, piece by piece, as you're going down the sales through the different agents. You need to speak to the estate agents, and if necessary the solicitors in the chain. So you need all of the areas of the chain sorted out. So who's buying what, who's at the bottom of the chain, who are all the solicitors, how are all the finances being raised, are all the finances in place, when were all of the sales arranged, was the first one just put in hand 2 weeks ago, or was it 3 months ago? Maybe the people at the bottom of the chain expect the chain to be able to complete in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and you've got somebody at the top of the chain who hasn't found yet. So you collect the timescales. When the actual property has been agreed and the memos of sale have gone out, so you've diligently checked all of these areas of your chain, then what happens is the letters arrive, one at the buyer solicitor, one at the seller solicitor. So they both have a memorandum of sale, which says all of the prices. They have it says all of the prices, says all of any agreed conditions. It checks any particular timescale and any fixtures and fittings, and that goes also to the buyer and the seller. So if there's any issue with any particular value, any problem with the name, spelling of a name, or the ownership of the property, or whatever that is, then what can happen is that can be rectified at the beginning. So as the agent, our job is to be particularly diligent about collecting a name and making sure that name is right, and making sure we've got all the names and that we've got all of the issues that surround the property, and that the timing of the sale can actually be managed. We can actually manage to sell the property in this timescale that everyone's expecting to run to. When the sale's actually sent out, the next thing to do is to phone the vendor. So the real estate agent phones the vendor and phones the buyer and try and arranges meetings independent of each other, not at the same time, but the real estate agent will take a sales assistant into a meeting, and between them both will make sure that the next stage is navigable. So what we mean by that is handing it over to the solicitor doesn't mean that our job's over. What we actually need to do is to make sure that the buyer knows what he's going to do and when he's going to do it, and the seller knows what he's got to do and when he's going to do it. If both parties know what's going to happen next, we usually find that the transaction should take between 6 and 10 weeks. Often when somebody's going wrong, it can take between 8 weeks and 25 weeks to do this part. So we need to get everything in place. We need their ID, the buyer's ID, and we need to make sure they're not on holiday. If they're in a rental, then they're not stuck in a rental for 6 months and they can't get out, because otherwise putting the sale together would be a bit silly. And that if they have put a sale on a property, that they've done a finance check and that the money is available, and that they understand that we need to make sure that the property has the financial power to be purchased by the buyer. So in the buyer's check, we need their ID, and their meeting, we need their ID, and we need to make sure their finances are in place, and they need to have had an offer check on the property anyway before the property comes off the market. So hopefully all those things have been done. When the buyer's in, we try and make sure their timescale marries up with the vendor's expectations. So the buyer normally comes in after the vendor coming into the office, or we go and see them, or we have a Zoom call or a sort of online call. What happens next is that we want both those parties, the buyer and the seller, to phone their solicitor every single week. A case study which is recent is that the seller solicitor didn't do anything at all for 5 weeks. So which means that the buyer gets under enormous pressure after a while, and the people involved in the sale, the longer they're in the sale process, the harder it gets for them to feel relaxed and for them to have a enjoyable journey, which is one of our values. So it's very important to instruct the buyer to speak to his solicitor on a weekly basis, and the seller to instruct their solicitor and phone their solicitor and ask each week what the progress has been. So I usually say a Tuesday morning, phone the solicitor, ask what the progress is. If there's any delay, let us know. Always signpost to the people involved. What we do is we always signpost to the people involved who are buying and selling who to speak to, when they can speak to them, and what to speak to them about. So that would be the real estate agent and the appropriate sales associate. So there's basically a contact within the branch which they know is handling this sale. Really, the ownership, however, we make very clear, is with the solicitor, and it's their job to transact this part of the sale. However, we're here as backstop. So if they're phoning on a weekly basis, they're taking control of their solicitor, and if anything goes wrong, they can phone us and we can drive their business forward. Now, sales progression is a completely different skill, which is in a different edition and a different training video. But to actually set it all up so far, you've had your memo of sale go out with correct conditions. You've obviously had your change sheet sorted out, to summarise. Then what you've done is you've got your buyer and seller who are happy with all that paperwork because you've been accurate and you've got everything done properly. They've actually now come in, or you've had an online call through Zoom for a sales meeting where you have put the onus on the solicitor to get the transaction through, and then weekly phone calls of progress to your buyer. You've also checked there's no timescale issues, and you've also checked the finances there, and you've got the ID for your buyer, and that throughout the chain there is strength and compatibility with the timescale. The next stage is to let the solicitors run and then deal with the issues, and that will be in the next video. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.